Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Peter Chen and I'm a Senior Lecturer here in the Department of Government and International Relations at the University of Sydney here. And I apologise for not being able to be there in person. I would really like to be talking to you about open access, something I'm really passionate about. But unfortunately I'm giving a lecture as we speak. I'm a political scientist, so I've been working in the area of political science here in Australia for a couple of decades. And I have a diverse range of interests. I'm an Australianist to begin with, and that means I focus on Australian politics and public policy making. But I also have interests in the role of technology in politics, social movements, media, and a range of different issues. And so this really makes me, under Isaiah Berlin's classification of writers, a kind of fox as opposed to a hedgehog. I have diverse interests, diverse methods. I pursue often mixed methods approach, and the things that I write on changes over time, but also within a particular time period. So I tend to be relatively diverse in my outlook and my interests. So for me personally, the choice of using open access publishing has two components. One is egotistical and the other is altruistic. As an egoist, I want people to read my work. I write to be read. I like my work to have value, and the value is in the reading. But also I think, as opposed to the hedgehog type writer of Berlin, who has a very focused area of writing, has a very specific view of who their interlocutors are, foxes can't be sure who will find value in their work. And so I think foxes particularly tend to be drawn to open access that allows us to be spread more broadly, both within our discipline but also outside our discipline. In terms of altruism, the taxpayers of Australia pay my salary. When I produce work, they've paid for it to be produced. And so I think that that work should not necessarily be caught behind paywalls that makes them pay a second time to access the work that has been done. But also I think open access allows people to be accountable to the people who fund them. And one of the things I think that is a challenge for universities today is making them relevant in a resource-starved environment. And part of that relevance is showing the people who pay for the work to be done that their money is being used responsibly and there are visible outcomes of public benefit. So I've had a range of experiences with open access publishing. I've published 3 books now in the open access format, something I'm quite proud of. And I've had positive and negative experiences of the process, that's safe to say. On the upside, as an egoist, I've had a great deal of success in getting people to read my work through open access. My last book that came out now has had tens of thousands of readers, which I feel is very impressive given that political science in Australia is a relatively select discipline. Most political scientists are North American, and the market for the work that I was doing is relatively specialised. It's also had a wider readership than it might have had as a for-profit publication with a relatively high cover price that a select and focused volume might have had. The second thing I'd probably say that's positive about open access is that I like open access spirit of innovation. And so, for example, my last book was produced as an audiobook, and that was an experiment that was done because it was in the open access format. Very few scholarly volumes are released as audiobooks, and the value of that came back to me when a student who has a learning disability actually approached me and said how they listened to my book as an audiobook and got great value that assisted them in a special way that printed text might not have had. And so I found that to be very rewarding as an author and also as an educator. Probably what I'd say on the flip side is that open access is definitely not right for everyone. And unfortunately, most of the kind of negatives I've experienced with open access has been the attitude of my professional colleagues with regards to it. And that is that open access is of a lower quality than some of the established commercial publishers, that you should focus on highly regarded international publishers, particularly early in your career, and leave it for more seasoned scholars to publish in the open access format to kind of lead the way. Personally, I reject that attitude, but I think it can be problematic for people who are negotiating their career path and also who have to deal with the reputational aspect of the work. And probably the other thing I'd say, which is related to that, is that there is a tension, I think, with open access in the bandwidth abundant environment. And that is, once upon a time, the narrowing process, the bottlenecking process that we saw with regards to commercial publishing tended to be a marker of quality. And now, of course, content is everywhere. There's content available on every topic at every moment of the day at no cost. And so it is, I think, increasingly difficult for people to determine what is valuable academic content without reading it. And so some people are increasingly using shorthands like the cost, the dollar figure that's put on the cover of a book as an indicator of its value. And I think that's problematic, and what it says is that we have to think about our open access publishing strategies and how we use other indicators of value to overcome some of those limitations. So finally, I should talk about my book. I'm very pleased and proud that it's becoming open access at this event. So my book, Australian Animal Welfare, Politics and Policy, is again a focused study of policy making and politics in Australia, this time about animal welfare policy. And this is a classic example of one of those volumes that I think is well suited to open access, in that is quite a specialist volume in many ways, both in terms of its approach, what we call a domain study, a specific sort of study of the policy making process, but also the case material on animal welfare, which is a specialised area of policy making with a select and small audience. Now, the volume is interesting in that I have had an interest in this topic area for a long period of time, but I've never written about it professionally because it was more of a personal interest. But following the move for a ban on live exports in Australia in 2011, I looked around and found that in the kind of established, historical closed publishing space, there hadn't been any work done by Australian political scientists on the topic of policy making in this area. And so, egotistically, I decided to fill that volume by looking at the history of animal welfare policy and law in Australia, those organisations that are involved in the policy making process, both governmental, non-governmental and corporate, using the mixed methods approach again to look at the policy process from a triangulated perspective involving both public opinion, formal elite policy making and activist activity and corporate's kind of engagement in the topic, and looking at the way in which policy is made, implemented and the sort of outcomes that is produced. So this is a specialised volume, but it's an important volume in many ways because I think it fills a gap in the literature between, in a sense, very good volumes on animal law that exist in the Australian context, and a lot of great work on philosophy and ethics about animals, but this kind of bridges those together, looking at how those values are translated through the policy process into law. And I hope you get access to the book and read it. Thank you for your time.